almost as much as who's the next Batman, who's the next Bond is like a Hollywood tradition. Whenever we have a migration of one Bond moving on and we're getting ready for the next Bond to come in, everybody's wondering who it's going to be. Daniel Craig has played Bond for a while, and quite frankly, he's my favorite Bond. I've always considered him to be the perfect amalgamation of the badassness of Sean Connery with the suaveness of Roger Moore, all put into one delightful package. And I've loved him as Bond. Haven't loved every one of the Bond movies that he's been in, but I think he's been a pretty terrific Bond. So for the last, couple of years since it was known that the last Bond film was going to be Daniel Craig's last, everybody's been speculating. Who's the new Bond? Who's the new Bond? Well, we've all put forth a lot of different names about who we could see walking in the shoes of a Timothy Dalton, of a Sean Connery, of a Roger Moore, of a Pierce Brosnan, and so on. Who's going to be the next in that line, that lineage, if you will? A lot of names with a lot of age range, too. We've seen a lot of names of actors who are pushing their 50s. We've seen actors named who are in the early 20s, all that kind of stuff. Well, we might be able to narrow it down a little bit because according to a new story in Variety, the casting director for James Bond is basically saying, don't count on anybody in their 20s because young actors lack the gravitas and mental capacity to play James Bond. Now, while that may sound harsh, and it is harsh, when you hear his rationale, it also might be considered fair a little bit. This is what it says. In a new interview with Radio Times, longtime James Bond casting director Debbie McWilliams explained why younger actors usually don't fit when it comes to finding a new James Bond. When we started, it was a slightly different feel, McWilliams said about the last search for a new 007 that ended with Daniel Craig's selection. We did look at a lot of younger actors, and I just don't think they have the gravitas. They didn't have the experience. They didn't have the mental capacity to take it on because it's not just the part they're taking on. It's a massive responsibility. And listen, do I think you should just discount actors who might be in their 20s just because they're in their 20s? No. But she does raise a good point. You're not just, when you're casting a new James Bond, you're not just casting an actor to come in and play a role in a film. You are casting somebody who, whether you like James Bond or not, I think most people will agree, is simply one of the most iconic individual characters in the history of cinema. And a character that, if you follow in the tradition, other than George Lazenby, you're going to play that role for a while. And you're going to carry this franchise for a while. You are the face of this franchise, nay, the face of England for the years that you play James Bond. And so it is a massive thing. And so when she says, look, we just got to get somebody in that we know can not just have the talent to play a role. We got to know that they can carry this responsibility of being that. And quite frankly, maybe somebody more in their 30s is a little bit more appropriate for it. Now, she does also say, by the way, that they are going to look for somebody more in their 30s because when the new person gets cast, you know what it's like today. No matter who gets cast in what role, there's always backlash, right? And nobody knows that better than Daniel Craig. Because while Daniel Craig was a beloved Bond, a lot of people forget it didn't start out that way. They go on to say this in the article. The team settled on Daniel Craig, who was in his 30s at the time. The decision did not receive unanimous praise. That's an understatement. As McWilliams told Entertainment Weekly back in 2021, she felt sorry for Craig after his casting led to extreme blowback from press who thought Craig didn't fit the part of Bond. And I'll tell you what, it wasn't just the press. I've talked about this too. I remember there was this big online campaign with the hashtag Craig not Bond. It was one of the earliest hashtag campaigns I'd ever seen in the movie industry or for a movie. People hated it. Hate it. Look at it, these hair's too blonde. Yep. James Bond doesn't have blonde hair because that's what's important.
Well, actually, in the novels, he's blonde.
I didn't know that. Is he actually blonde in the novels?
Mm-hmm. So it was actually more accurate.
Well, there you go. So they were stupid. No, stupid. I mean, but they would say, look at that dirty blonde hair. That's not James Bond, because clearly, again, that's what's the important thing. A lot of things saying he's not good looking enough to play James Bond. I didn't know James Bond is traditionally quite the womanizer, but I mean, Daniel Craig, I don't think anybody looks at Daniel Craig today and says, that's an unattractive man. He's a good looking dude. But it was just funny, the blowback. And now today, as we flash forward, I remember the same kind of stuff happened with Hugh Jackman when he was cast as Wolverine. Same sort of thing happened with Heath Ledger when he was cast as Joker. You know, there's a history of that. Then you fast forward and say, oh, look at that. Now, look, it's okay for as a movie fan to think, I think that role was miscast. That's one thing. But to be so adamant that this person can't play James Bond, but it happens. And then we look back, and we've all had actors, right? We've had actors we look at it and go, I don't know, like Brandon Routh. I gotta say, when Brandon Routh was cast as Superman, I had my doubts. I had some very verbal doubts. I mean, he looked great for the part, sure. But I'm like, this was an inexperienced actor. Superman's an important character. And I had my issues. But I ended up loving Brandon Routh. Not as much as Henry, but I ended up loving Brandon Routh as Superman. So it's kind of interesting hearing this. So Chris, as an actress yourself in this industry and stuff like that, I'm sure you come across maybe one of the first things your eyes fall to when you're seeing a call sheet or whatever is like age range or whatever. Mm-hmm. What do you think about the comments here that somebody in their 20s being a new James Bond just isn't a good idea? Do you agree, disagree, overly harsh? Spot on. What do you think? From
a character standpoint, I think it totally makes sense, right? If you are some young 20-something, why would you be in these elite rooms? Why would you be in these like very high-end, opulent things with like big political leaders or things like that? From an espionage standpoint, I think you'd stick out like a sore thumb, right? I also, though, I love the addition on here of they don't have the mental capacity, which I think the better
that was
phrase
more harsh.
Here. That was more harsh. I think really what they mean here is how overwhelming this is to somebody, especially a young actor. You know, we're going to be talking about Harry Potter later. You look at those young actors who obviously were, you know, in like their early teens when they were cast, 11, 12, that kind of age range. But that was really, really shocking for all of them to be thrown onto a global platform, right? To be in your 20s and have everybody scrutinizing you, that's got to be a lot to deal with. Daniel Craig at least had the good fortune of being an older, more seasoned actor who could kind of roll with those punches as really, really uncalled for they were. But I think having a 20-year-old in there could kind of shake them up and make them freak out a little bit. But again, I think if you're looking at the character and what they're supposed to do and what they need to be doing in this, upwards of 35 makes sense.
Well, he's also supposed to be a naval officer. So
Yeah.
how did he rank up in 20 years?
Exactly. You got to have all that experience.
Yeah.
So does this narrow down for us the field at all? Because honestly, in all of the kind of speculating that we've done, and all of us as film fans have done about who, I can't recall a lot of people bring up a lot of names of people in their 20s, because a lot of the people that I would consider to be front runners for it would still fall in that age range. Like I still think of a Henry Cavill. I still think of a Tom Hiddleston. Mm-hmm. I still think of a why do I keep forgetting Quicksilver's name?
Aaron Taylor Johnson.
Aaron Taylor Johnson,
Yeah.
thank you. I still think of Aaron Taylor Johnson. Mm-hmm. I still think of, this is a little bit outside the box, but if you think about all the key elements, Dev Patel. I still think Dev Patel could be
Dev
really
Patel would be
interesting.
wonderful. Henry Goulding would be wonderful.
Henry Goulding is another
he'd
one.
be
So all these guys
incredible.
still kind of fall in that, they're all in their 30s. Henry's approaching 40, but I think he's still in his 30s.
Mm-hmm.
But so I don't know if it narrows it down. Does it narrow it down for you at all? Do you think it's still the main names are
It's
still in
really
play?
the age range that I was looking at before. Every time we've speculated about this, it's been more of an issue of, are they outside the range they're looking for? You know, because it has been people approaching 40 or older. You know, like Idris Elba, I still think would be a really, really cool one. But
Well, he shot that down.
Yeah, he's already talked about how he doesn't want to do that and how he's not the right age for it. But people, you know, like a Richard Madden too, around 36,
Oh, that's
37.
a great name. That's
like
another name I like a lot.
The actors we just discussed all kind of fit the brief.
All right, guys, question is for you. What do you think about this? Apparently, the casting director says an actor in their 20s doesn't have the mental capacity or the gravitas to carry a James Bond thing. Do you think she has a point? Do you think she's being overly critical? Does it narrow down for you who you think the frontrunners of the new James Bond might be? Whatever you guys think, jump down to the comment section below and let us know your thoughts. Guys, we want to thank a sponsor of this video, Rocket Money. The average person has around 12 paid subscriptions. Think about that. If you think you're only subscribed to a handful of services, you might want to double check. With Rocket Money, you can quickly identify and cancel all of your unwanted subscriptions. Rocket Money, formerly known as Truebill, is a personal finance app that finds and cancels your unwanted subscriptions, monitor your spending, and helps you lower your bills all in one place. Rocket Money will quickly and easily identify your subscriptions for you so you can stop paying for the ones you don't want and don't even use. Simply find the subscription you don't want and press cancel, and Rocket Money will cancel it for you. No more long hold times with customer service or tedious emailing back and forth. Rocket Money makes canceling subscriptions as easy as the click of a button. My wife Ann and I moved out of Burbank 2 years ago, and one of the first things I discovered when I loaded up Rocket Money was that I was still paying for a gym membership I haven't even been to in Burbank in 2 years. So stop throwing away your money. Cancel unwanted subscriptions and manage your expenses the easy way by going to rocketmoney.com/Campea. That's rocketmoney.com/Campea. rocketmoney.com/Campea.